2, 1. Let's go. It's time to Dad Up. Welcome to the Dad Up Podcast, the podcast for dads about dads being dads. Get ready for exciting guests talking about their experiences of parenting, the good and the not so good. Bang that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode, and let's get started. Here is your host, Brian Ward.
Welcome to another episode of Dad Up, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you very much for tuning in or watching wherever you are. Make sure you guys are subscribing to the show so you don't miss any of the awesome guests like the one I have joining me today. This guy is incredible. He's got just a remarkable history of success in the things that he's doing. He's a professional free runner, and he's been featured on, TV shows, right? Movies, commercials. He even did some damage on American Ninja Warrior. So he's got, I want to say over 30 million views, right? On different platforms. And he's got almost 2 million followers throughout all his social media. This guy is just incredible. I'm glad he's decided to join us today and talk about his dad experiences. But Jesse Flair, welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Awesome. For my listeners who may not know who you are, let's run through a back history of you. I want to know a little bit more about you, how you grew up, the kind of things you went through, how you kind of transitioned into your role that you're doing now, because you've been a stunt double in various shows and things like that. And then obviously I want to know about your family. It's a dad podcast. I want to know about your kids and your family. So hit us with your history.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I grew up the youngest of 3 in Long Island, New York. My dad was always into like motors, and so we grew up with like quads and snowmobiles and little motorcycles. And I was riding a motorcycle when I was 3 years old and not able to touch the ground. So my earliest lessons were like really learning how to like do things on your own, right? When you stop, you have to jump off the motorcycle, otherwise it's going to fall on you and burn your skin. So his parenting style might not be the favorite for some other people out there, but it definitely helped shape me into who I was and helped me learn about sort of self-control and the fact that I am the one responsible for the things that happen to me. So through that sort of understanding, I grew up loving action sports. I did anything and everything with boards, bikes, blades, and that slowly led me into this world of just extreme sports and this idea of maybe going pro within one of them. So as I continued, I sort of found the things I liked the most: BMX, dirt jumping, and this rollerblading became like a really big passion of mine because it was very much like these things are attached to you and you are the one that does the things. And as I started to really get into that, I got my first little sponsor and it was cool. I was getting a bunch of free stuff. And then I ended up going to college where I discovered parkour. These guys who, if you're not familiar with parkour, it's all about being fast and efficient, overcoming any obstacle that's in your way. There are no tools. You're not, there's no BMX bike or blades or snowboards, or you are the device. So you are responsible for taking off, but you're also responsible for absorbing all that impact and landing. So through that, I just kind of fell in love with this idea of being in control and being in movement, which led me to New York City, where I worked, I should mention, for whatever reason, I ended up going to school for art education, and then I transitioned into getting my bachelor's of fine arts in sculpture. But because of parkour and this idea of movement, I was like, I want to have fun. I want to make a living doing the things I love. So I'd go home every summer and be the head camp counselor at a skate park. So when I got to New York, I was working in a gallery, but I was also searching the web for Craigslist for ads and things that really could allow me to make a living off of the parkour. And I found this really cool casting for Eastman Kodak Company, and they were shooting this short film commercial up in Rochester, New York. And so I sent them this video. I made my first real parkour video, and they loved it and ended up casting me as the lead character of this thing. And that they followed me through this whole journey into the city and into a circus. And long story short, it was just like a taste of Hollywood magic. There was real film cameras. There was the guy Fred Murphy who shot Freddy vs. Jason and The Secret Window and all these different cool films. So all of a sudden I was like, oh, this is what it feels like to have a real film production, be a part of a real film production, which then led me to the idea of well, maybe I should move to Hollywood. 12 years later, here we are. I have probably over 50 film credits. I've had guest starring roles in TV shows. I was part of a show called Ultimate Tag, which I was one of the pro taggers, and that did well. It was the #1 show in the summer on Fox, as well as, like you said, American Ninja Warrior. All these kind of crazy adventures, as well as stunt doubling Nightcrawler for the X-Men films, Captain Marvel, Mandalorian, tons of cool credits. And now we're actually in a really interesting transitional point in my life, because my son is 20 months old, just over a year and a half, heading to 2. And I had continued to sort of work stunt jobs, but I am currently been on the road now for 2 months, living in an RV. We put all our stuff in storage, got out of the place, the house, 3-bedroom house that we were renting in Orange County. And we're actually currently seeking out, like, where are we going next, and what is that next passion that might fuel me to, like, have fun and make a new living. So
all right, cool. Well, let me ask you this. When you were growing up, obviously your dad was kind of into the motorsports kind of thing, and you were riding dirt bikes and all that kind of stuff. Was there any major injuries that you might have suffered? Because obviously those kind of sports, I mean, you're going to experience something like that. So, well, I mean, and you hear a lot of, like, I don't know, you do skateboarding and stuff like that. I mean, you hear about these guys that endure some serious, especially with these extreme sports, some serious injuries. What do you think been some of yours?
Yeah, I mean, through parkour and I guess all the action sports, I've had blown out ankles, and I'm trying to think of, like, a lot of the action sports stuff. Like, I have broken fingers. I had 18 stitches in my shin. My collarbone kind of sticks out weird. I don't know when that happened, but I think I fractured my ribs doing BMX stuff. So I landed on my head and compacted that. Oh, wow. Definitely have, like, some back crazy stuff that happened, like a bulging discs and herniated discs, and kind of gotten over all that through physical therapy. And so through a lifetime of action sports, I'm 36 right now. Yeah. Wow. And doing action sports from such a young age, you're putting your body through, pretty bad stuff for that long of a time. So your like age versus your, like, action sports age is a very kind of different thing, right? Because you're using your body to such an extreme version of what most people do.
Yeah. Did your parents approve of what you wanted to do?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, like I said, I think my dad was always kind of in the realm of, like, if you're being smart about it, right? If you're leading, like, figuring out ways to lead up to the thing you're doing, you're checking your surfaces, right? Like, I think one of the first times I jumped off something in front of him, because I had learned about the ability to control momentum by, no matter, depending on the height of something you're jumping off of, even if it's like this, you jump straight down, all your impact's going down into your body. But if you can get your momentum to jump out and roll out of it, you're actually, like, absorbing your momentum along your path, not down into the ground. So I think I was excited after I kind of learned how to control that. I went and jumped off some big trailer we had, and his concern was, like, did you check the roof of that thing? You push off and all of a sudden your feet don't, so he was more interested in, like, are you thinking about what you're doing before you do it? Not just what you're doing, but the things that you're doing it on and everything else that leads around it. So yeah, I mean, but for the most part, they always kind of approved and supported it, for sure.
Oh, that's interesting that you bring up kind of the proper way to absorb impact and when you're doing these various jumps. Did you go through any training? Did you have to do extensive training to learn it, or is just kind of trial by error?
No, trial by error. I think that's the biggest thing that parkour as a sport has ever taught me. And pretty much most action sports will teach you this. Otherwise, you just end up giving up because you're like, I can't get it. Is the idea that progressions are king. If you can learn to take the tiny steps and celebrate them and break things down to the tiniest progressions, then it's really much easier to get to that end goal, because you're not thinking about, like, how do I get from here to up here? Well, you just walk up the stairs, and all of a sudden it's going to be a lot easier to get there. So through that, you start to problem solve in a very different way, not just in movement, but in life.
Yeah. Now, obviously, as we get older, our bodies, kind of break down a little bit. I mean, you said you're 36 now. Obviously, is it going to be some sort of, I guess physical training as far as keeping your body in shape. Is that something you're pretty big on to make sure that you don't suffer the normal injuries that maybe I would if I tried to do something?
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely at this age, I'm already starting to feel, and, you know, because we're so aware of our bodies and what we are capable of, and that regeneration of like tissue and strength and how sore you last. And I've definitely recognized, all right, injuries are hitting in a very different way. So I injured my ankle, probably one of the worst and ankle injuries I've done in my career, about 8 months ago, and it's still not good. Like it's part of the reason why I've stepped out of doing that much parkour. I'm leaving Hollywood to potentially see what's next, is because for one, my body's not reacting the same way that I wish it would, which then causes this sort of not only a pressure in the performance side of me, because I'm getting hired by stunt coordinators that expect me to be able to be capable of the things they've seen me do online, which, you know, from all the very, very active, super in it training, of course, you're very tuned in and you're showing the world some of your best stuff. So there was a pressure there that we're going to hire you. And I don't know if they want me to do the gnarliest thing I've ever done and expect me to be capable and ready for it, or not. But regardless, I think, you know, more so I've kind of had this recent discovery of like, stunts are dangerous. A lot of people think, oh, well, it's Hollywood, you guys get pads and mats and all this stuff. And at the end of the day, it's not always like that. You're almost guaranteed to get bumps and bruises. I wrote a book called How to Become a Stuntman. And in that book, I break down quite a bit of this stuff about, you know, there's one whole chapter that stunts are dangerous. And everyone I interviewed unanimously agreed, like, you're going to get hurt. It's just how hurt do you get? So during quarantine, I think my son was 9 months old. I got hired to do a job in Atlanta. And part of the whole COVID thing was had to be super isolated, tested every day. We weren't allowed to leave the hotel. We'd go straight from the hotel to set. They'd scan our cars. It was a circus of like keeping everybody COVID safe. But part of that journey was that I had to be there alone. I had to leave my son and my wife at home. And then on top of it, there was one stunt that I was doing that was this big sequence that led me to sliding down this thing backwards, breaking through these boards on the scaffolding, and then falling to another like 10 feet to the ground on a kind of a hidden mat. But because it was on scaffolding, when we did the test, I got pushed to the side at one of them. And I was very close to hitting these metal scaffolding bars that just can't be covered for the shot.
Yeah.
So heading into doing the shot for real that day, you don't know how many times you're going to do it. There's now cameras, you know, they're changing angles. In this particular shot, they used drones literally coming in, breaking through the boards after me. And so I was going into that day with this very interesting first time experience of like, I have a son now. Like if I do hit my head, and I've seen head injuries, I put out a film called Bound by Movement. It's a documentary about our last tour. And during that tour, we had one of our athletes hit his head really bad, and it took him out of the ability to walk and talk for quite a while. And luckily, he's pretty much made a full recovery. But through that experience, I've kind of have this like post-traumatic stress about head injuries, because I've now witnessed so many of them, and I've seen what they can do to a person like that. So I literally had this moment before I left to set that day where I sat in my hotel room and I filmed like a goodbye video, and I just crying. And I'm like, if you're seeing this, you know, the whole spiel. And I've never watched that video. Luckily, my wife and son have never seen it. Hopefully they never will. But it was this moment of realization that what I'm doing as a stuntman might not be worth the money for our family if it has the potential to change our lives for the worst, you know? So through that, I've kind of like these things that are all happening, getting older, and this stuff happening. It was like, all right, well, what is next? You know, is there another passion that I can find that's going to fuel me? Is there another location in this United States that's just so overwhelmingly beautiful that can hold us there and blow us away? So that's why we're on the road right now.
Have you figured it out yet? You know what you want to do?
No. I mean, we definitely checked out Oregon and Washington as places that we find are beautiful. A lot of people have been talking about Idaho, so we're heading to Sandpoint tomorrow. But in terms of the passion, I mean, I think what I love is giving people an experience. And through our tours, I've hosted, I think, over 60 events around the world and the globe. And each one of those events, probably the most happiest moments, not just being an athlete, but getting to give people the experience of being there together and bringing communities together. And so I think it's probably going to end up doing something with that idea, whether it's, buying a bunch of land and making really cool experiences for people to go and, come in and find, and maybe it's a retreat or some, cool space like that. But yeah, not sure yet.
Cool. That's cool. That's cool.
Open-ended.
Oh. All right. Now kind of transitioning now kind of into your dad role. You got a 2-month-old. Obviously, the first question that comes to mind when I think of, little boys, I have 2 boys now, they're adults, they're 22 and 19. So I've got a little bit more experience than you as a father, but I know thinking back to them when they were growing up and some of the risky things, I mean, kids are fearless. Some of the risky things that they did, I'm just like, oh, be careful. Oh, you go over, run over and grab them or something. But knowing who you are and the things that you've gone through, I mean, you think you're going to be that kind of dad where, your son decides to climb up on the dining room table one day and decides to jump off? I mean, you're going to be the one, no, don't do that. Or you just let him do it. Let him experience it.
No, it's a great question. So he's actually 20 months old right now.
Okay.
He started walking across the room, not like, oh, he's take his first step, like walking across the room on his own at 8 months. So at about 5 months, he was already like standing and pushing a box around. And it was like absolutely mind blowing how functional he was. But with that idea of him being this extremely functional young child comes, is he capable of understanding the repercussions of the things that he's surrounding himself and jumping off of or walking to or stepping over. And so I think a lot of people, because of my history, expected me to be able to sit back and go like, all right, let's see what he does. But instead, my wife, Brian, is way more, all right, he'll be all right. Because I think, like I said about the head stuff, is like, I'm so aware of how you can get injured and the things that will injure you. And in the spatial awareness or the mental mapping that comes out of doing parkour in any environment, I see the little like 2-inch step here or that crack that's going to catch his toe. So I'm constantly in this like turmoil of like protecting him. And it actually
defense
is
mode.
Yeah, super defense mode. And it's very draining. Because I'm trying to have conversations with people and I just have this like spotlight vision of just being like watching him and oh yeah, I know. And and it's like, so it's been interesting to see what kind of father challenges I'm facing. But at this point, he's 20 months old. He has been walking for a while. He is getting super functional. His movement, his skills are great. And I think even from like 4 months, I was teaching him how to like, you're on a pillow. Like we had this big fluffy love sack thing. And he taught him how to like, oh, if you want to get down, you hang on here and drop down to your feet. And he got it. So I started teaching him like, if you're going to do these things, you just do it properly. Right. And he's still learning, but it is amazing to me how quickly they do get it and how quickly they'll understand and mimic your movement and see the things that you're doing. They are adults, right? Like kids are just little adults who are developing their brain. So I think when you think about it like that, it's such a powerful stance versus like, you don't get it,
Right. Right. Yeah, that's cool. I want to ask you this question. It's kind of a 2-part question, or 2 parts to the question. The first being, if your son decides he wants to kind of follow your path and kind of get into the extreme sports that you got into, how would you react to that? And then the second part to that question is, if parents that are listening to this have kids that may have an interest or are showing these kinds of interests in this type of sport, what would you say to those parents? So kind of a 2-part question for you.
No, totally get it. Yeah, I mean, I think when he was first announced as like, oh, we're having a son, and he came into the world, I had so many of my fans online just kind of being like, he's going to be a parkour legend, all this stuff. And so much of my stance was like, no, he can be whatever he wants to be. I don't want to push him into anything, specifically that idea of like, you should do this, follow my footsteps. Like there's no urging me to want him to do it, But like you're saying, if he decides that that's what he wants to do because he's seen it, he's around it, I don't know, I will 100% support it, because it is, not only has it made me a much better person in all aspects of life, as a person, as a businessman, as a student of life, like it could teach you so much. And I think, to your other point, for any parents out there who have a kid that is interested in any action sport, or anything that is like sort of that self-development side of it, is in a team sport and might seem a little dangerous and extreme, is like, by not supporting them, you're setting them up to potentially do it the wrong way, or, or again, be shamed about it. And then it kind of creates this like, want to do it even more. And then they're not supported to do it safely. Right. And the beautiful thing about parkour is, I'm also a co-owner of a company called Tempest Freerunning. We have 3 very professionally made parkour and freerunning gyms, some of the biggest versions of that in the world. 2 of those are in California, and one of them is in Dallas, Texas. And there are places like that exist all around the world, not just the US, that you can take your child to. And now they're not, instead of being fearful of them jumping off of something because they think it's cool, or they've seen it on the internet and they don't get it, now you're teaching them how to, well, if you're going to do it anyway, let me show you how to do it correctly. And that's where, you hopefully get a good instructor, or someone who can teach them not only the ability to do it, but the progressions of doing it, and then to respect the idea of progressions.
Yeah, I think you're right. And, it comes to anything, whether it's, those type of sports, or even just playing, basketball or baseball or whatever, you have the proper coaches and the proper instruction to get you to become better at it and more proficient at it. I think is important. So at those facilities that you're talking about, that you are a co-owner of, so you say there are coaches there are trainers there that parents can hire to work with their kids.
Yeah. And they can go to classes. And I think even more so than like getting better is like having fun, right? I think that's the beauty of parkour for all of us that do it, is that it's just this incredibly fun thing to do. And you experience growth every day. And I guess the question would be, well, how could you experience growth every day? Because so much of what the sport is finding whatever your current physical limitation is, or your mental limitations are, and trying to push that a little bit further, right? I think that should be the goal to any sport. But when you're the one like deciding what that limit is, finding it on, because you're the only one that can find it. I can't look at you and go, maybe your jump is this big. Like, you have to know, you have to try it, and then try to figure out the way to do it a little bit better, right? Or a little bit bigger, or a little bit, scarier.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, cool. Well, let me ask you this. If I were to, let me ask you this, the lessons, were there any particular lessons that you learned from your parents that you hope to maybe, kind of adapt into your role as a parent?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things my takeaways from my father really is that sort of how and why things work, right? What do I mean by that? Specifically, like this idea of, if we understand the thing and we break down like, how something is happening, then we're not just like shooting in the dark. And it sounds like such a broad statement, but like you can apply it to anything. So one of my favorite things to do is try to explain things to my son. And those people who've been around me while parenting, we talk very like normal to him since he was such a baby. We don't do the baby voice and that stuff. And I'm explaining things and using words that he doesn't understand yet, but you work through it. And if I say a word that I don't think he's ever heard before, I'll kind of be like, that means this, and then keep talking. And so I think as he gets older and we get even more into that sort of conversational state, I think it's really going to just be this idea of like, just breaking things down and trying to understand them before you try to do the thing. And whether that's as simple as like, putting the triangle in the square, right. Well, like, how do you explain that? Well, this shape here is too big. These edges are hitting. And this whole puzzle is based on things lining up and matching. So if they match, you have to turn, it's just like explaining it, but that then applies to everything. How do you get big on social media? How do you grow your following? well, first we have to understand why social media exists, right? Where it's created by these businesses that are using, people to market their products and get, so like, then you start understanding something. You're not just posting a random video. You're actually like creating a video with the recipe of how, and that fits in, the right way.
Yeah, I get that. Now your son's 2 months old. Obviously, he's
20.
too young. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
20 months old.
Okay.
20 months old. He is obviously too young for this question right now. But if I were to ask him a few years from now, tell me something about your dad, what would you hope he would say about you?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think my hope would be that he would say that he lived like sort of happy. He's just a happy, passionate person, or he followed his passions and didn't I don't know. It's like, so it's a good one, because I think it's so much of what I'm developing right now and trying to figure out like what I want to do, because I think I've had such a good past of doing all these things. But yeah, I hope that he can just kind of see like that me as a person, just lived a passionate life and didn't let the stress of the world stop me from doing anything that I might not want to do. Yeah.
Well, I would encourage you as a kind of a new dad. I mean, you're a new dad, so I would encourage you, as he grows and kind of evolves as a little human being, continue to ask that question of him.
Yeah,
because his opinion will change, and kids will be brutally honest with you. So it'll help you. It may help you become a better dad. Some of the things he might say to you. So, well, cool. Well, let me ask you this: if my listeners want to look you up, learn a little bit more about you, what's the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on everything: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube. You could just search my name, which is Jesse LaFlair, Jesse LaFlair, LaFlair. And if they have any interest in getting into the stunt world, they can check out my book called How to Become a Stuntman at howtobecomeastuntman.com.
Awesome. Well, very cool. Well, listen, Jesse, I'm thrilled that you came on. It's been a pleasure. I'm glad we've gotten a chance to know each other. So thank you very much for being on the show, brother. I really appreciate it. You represent the dad up community very well. Even though you're a new dad, I can see your heart is in it. So keep doing what you're doing, brother.
Thank you.
Everybody, this has been another episode of Dad Up Podcast. Thank you very much for joining, listening, watching, wherever you are. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the shows. And thanks again to my good friend, Jesse LaFlair, for being on. Appreciate it.
Bye. Peace.
Thanks for listening to the Dad Up Podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next weekly episode. While you're at it, leave a rating and review. And if you know someone this show can help, be sure to share it with them. Want to learn more? Check out the website at daduptribe.com or leave Brian a message on Instagram at daduppodcast.